they've acquired the titles, they've acquired the bank account and the investments, and they were expecting for happiness to come because they checked all of the boxes. And they usually find themselves in a place where they're like, I've done all the things right. I went to school, I got the degrees, I met the partner, and now I'm still not happy.
Lucy Castillo is an executive leadership coach and founder of Black Women Are the Bomb. With nearly 30 years of working with groups and individuals, Lucy helps people reconnect the mind, body, and emotions to create lasting healing and change. Welcome to the New You Game Plan, your blueprint for health and fitness transformation. I'm your host, Kirk Charles. On this episode of the New You Game Plan, Lucy will help us reconnect to our true identity and source of fulfillment with her insight as a somatic practitioner using emotional and physical awareness. I've had the pleasure of knowing Lucy for years. She's a masterful communicator and brilliant at what she does. So let's get to it. I am here today with a very dear friend of mine, Miss Lucy Castillo. And she is a somatic practitioner, also an executive coach. And we're going to pick her brain to find out what she knows that's going to help us be the best representation of ourselves. So welcome. I call her Lucy. Welcome, Lucy.
Thank you for having me, Captain Kirk. I call him Captain Kirk.
Tell me, what is a somatic practitioner?
A somatic practitioner is someone who helps people develop and maintain body awareness, often for healing purposes.
Body awareness, what does that mean?
So oftentimes in our work, for example, me as a coach, I get paid for what's in my brain and what's in my head. And we live in a culture where what we think is elevated over how we feel and what we feel. So you might know people who have pushed through having a bad ankle or something sprained, and in their minds they can't pause, they can't stop, and they just sort of keep pushing through. Another part of it is that because in our culture and society we prioritize things in the brain, we often ignore signs and signals or even symptoms that happen below the body, right? And so there might be a shallow breath, or there might be a pain or something that's trying to get our attention. And so it's like being in your car and only paying attention to the gas gauge, right? I'm only paying attention to one part, and I'm ignoring every other signal or indicator in my car. And so the thinking is that you pay attention to the full dashboard, our full bodies that are beautifully, exquisitely designed, we can have a fuller experience, and an experience that also honors what's happening for us in terms of our body, any moment, in every moment of life.
So why do we fall into the syndrome, I guess, of only thinking about one thing and not everything?
Yeah, I think in Western culture, we simply, and capitalism, it's really about what do you produce? What do you do? So when you meet someone, the first thing we usually ask them is, what do you do for a living? And that is not centering all of who we are. It's centering what we produce often for other people. So I think it's a cultural thing, mostly in Western culture. And we also prioritize things like talking, speaking in the written word. And we often don't spend a lot of time just being in our bodies, resting. And so things like meditation or yoga are practices that allow people to be in their bodies. And so you might even be familiar with either a trope or a stereotype of how Zen people that practice yoga are, or people who are involved in those sorts of practices, because they tend to get us in our body, and we pay attention and experience things differently when we're fully in our bodies.
So in your business and with your clients, what type of people normally gravitate toward you to seek your assistance?
That's a great question. I think somatics works for everyone, but the people that I tend to work with who are attracted probably to just working with me are usually really successful women who are often experience some life change, right? And so they've acquired the titles, they've acquired the bank account and the investments, and they were expecting for happiness to come because they checked all of the boxes. And they usually find themselves in a place where they're like, I've done all the things right. I went to school, I got the degrees, I met the partner, and now I'm still not happy. And they're usually disconnected from themselves because they listened to what their families or their culture told them success looked like. And oftentimes they were just here and they weren't fully embodied. And so people who are often struggling or trying to figure out what's going on, they usually haven't diagnosed what the problem is, but they know something is amiss. something is off and something doesn't feel right, and so they're looking for support.
So I don't feel right, something's going on, I have no idea what it is, and I come to you. What is your process of really trying to dig in there and find out what's going on?
Right. So what's great about somatic practice is it does involve some talking. People might be really familiar with traditional talk therapy. So we do have conversations, but what I'm really going to do is guide you back into your body. Now, everyone isn't always immediately ready to get into their bodies, and it might feel a little hokey at first, but we might just have them notice where their breath is coming from. I noticed that a lot of times I would be breathing shallow from my chest versus a breath from my belly or my diaphragm that's going to replenish me way more deeply than a sort of shallow chest breath, right? So initially, we're probably going to talk. I'm going to find out what's going on. And in their telling of their story, I might just invite them to cue into, when you say that, do you notice anything happening in your body? And they might need time to like, oh, when I said that, you know what? I felt a little tightness in my chest, or my belly got tight, or I felt butterflies. There are lots of different ways that your body will sort of signal to you. But I will, in the telling of the story and in the conversation, I'll invite them to pay attention to their bodies, because their bodies, as you've heard, maybe the body remembers. And so things that we may not have logically registered, our bodies have. And so in the telling of stories or going back or thinking ahead, I'll invite them to get into their bodies, and we'll just follow that information. So I don't have like a magic wand or some sort of magic bullet. Their bodies are actually the magic tools that are going to help them reconnect.
Do you meet mostly in person with your clients, or can you do something like this online?
You would be surprised. It's mostly virtual now, simply because of the way the world works. And I can work with someone, for example, I have a friend who's in Hawaii who moved, right? And so we can connect virtually, and it can happen. I'm paying attention to breath. I'm paying attention to facial gestures. I'm paying attention to rate of speed and tone and volume. And those are all things that I can still notice even when we're in a virtual environment. I do love being in person. Mostly that has been with groups, right? So you can also do a somatic practice in a collective or in a community. And so mostly it's been one-on-one with clients, but it can also be as a community as well.
So I'm a personal trainer. I need help. I want a freebie. I want some consultation. I'm not a woman, but I need you greatly.
Of course.
And I'm an exercise person, personal trainer for
Yeah.
years. Do you incorporate exercise in what you do?
Great. I wouldn't call it exercise, but somatics can incorporate movement. And so we might do standing exercises. We do lots of things like shaking or stretching, bending. But there could be dance that could happen in it. Dance is not my background, but I certainly will incorporate movement to loosen things and to see how that supports or facilitates them, again, being more connected to their body. Oftentimes I find that people can be stiff. So that might limit what we can do, but that also is information, right? There might be an exercise that I might be able to offer them that they can do between sessions that allows them in session to be able to access more range of motion. Your problem.
As a layperson, who may not have contact with you, and I just can't call you on the phone and come and see you like I'm here doing now, is there a way that I can sort of diagnose myself and tell if I'm sort of disconnected to my body?
So if, as a person who's into fitness, I would assume that you know your body really well, but that may not always translate to the internal. And so if you can move through your day and you can say or sense, I notice when I am in certain places, my body, my stomach changes, or my heart rate increases or decreases in certain situations. So if you can move through different spaces and environments and notice how your body information, your body data changes, then I might say that you do have some insight there. But the challenge is, which is where the talking and the story comes from, it's often not until we're in the midst of something that a person hasn't always registered it as a challenge. For example, a lot of people, busy executives that I work with, do not rest. And so I'll say, well, what do you do for self-care? And they're like, I coach ball. I'm like, I don't know if that sounds like rest. So some people's even idea of what they are doing to connect with their body actually has them not focusing on their bodies. And so being able to, for example, I might say, just lie down for 5 minutes on your back and notice what's happening in your body. And if you can do that, like some people say, I didn't feel anything. That's a really good sign that you're not connected to your body. You're like, no, I feel fine. Everything is clear. I don't feel anything. Not feeling things, because we are usually feeling things every moment of the day. And so if someone's watching this and says, I don't feel anything in my body at all, that's probably a sign that they should call me.
All right. So we know we're in trouble. Well, we know we're not connected.
No, we
not
are.
in trouble.
Yeah.
But we're not connected properly. We're like 90% there, maybe.
I'm going to say, no, I would likely say that most people are not in their bodies.
They're not in their
I would
bodies.
say most people are minimally in their bodies. They're in their heads. They can talk themselves out of exercising. They can talk themselves out of why they should not extend that boundary with that person. We are thinking, and we are often not in our bodies.
Wow, that's scary.
Because if we were in our bodies, we probably wouldn't do the things we do the way we do them.
Well, what things? What are you talking about?
The way we eat, the way we engage. This is a great test. If you are talking to someone that you are in a relationship with, and your heart rate changes when they respond or when they say something. I'm understanding choose your battles. But oftentimes, women, you might have a mom or mother-in-law or whatever who wants you to be something other than what you are. And when you engage with that person, your heart increases, you start to get sweaty, but you continue to do it because you feel that you have to. And maybe you do. But what I would say is, if you were in your body and honored the information that your body was giving you, you might come up with a plan to adjust that relationship, limit it in some way. I'm not saying you have to just write everyone off because they do something you don't like, but we often are stuffing things that we don't want to face because we don't want to manage them, because often as women we don't want to be impolite and we don't want to be mean and we don't want to be labeled a certain way. And so one of the things that somatics helps you do is when you get in your body, you get to see the power that you have. And it's often detrimental, right? Because sometimes what I'll find is people will develop physical issues because of mental, emotional challenges that they have.
So you said that people stuff things, which is making me think that there may be some childhood experience. I had like 50, well, I hate to say how old I am, but 50 years ago, even maybe 60 years. Yeah. And maybe I've stuffed it and I've forgotten about it. Do people have awakenings regarding what they may have forgotten about?
1000%. And that's why I said earlier that you have to take your time in going there, because people will have things that they might not have identified or labeled as traumatic or abusive, but it really did give them sort of dysfunctional or unhealthy ways of managing. So a lot of women were raised to be the person who did everything in their household. And now that's the way they function in their relationship. That's the way they function at work. But it's exhausting to them. And so they are not aware that it happened because they were the oldest of the children and their parents put them in charge of the other siblings. And so now they had to do that for survival. They had to cook, get the kids ready, take them to school, pick them up for school. So they had a lot of adult responsibilities as a child. In Black communities and communities of color, immigrant communities, we might not say that that's abusive. We'd say that's you being the eldest, right? But what often happens is people are continuing those patterns of behavior unconsciously and not understanding, why am I not happy? Or why is it that everyone's always asking me? No one's ever helping me. And it's because that's the way we're showing up, often unconsciously. So getting back in our bodies and telling some of those stories, we often do go back to childhood and telling the story of what that was like, and all of those things matter. But a lot, just like in other therapies, a lot of the ways of being and some of the reasons why we had to disconnect from our bodies were all about safety and survival. So it's not to say that developing that pattern or that behavior was wrong of you. It's often how they were able to survive some harsh or traumatic experiences. The problem is that we haven't stopped to say, I'm not a 6-year-old, I'm not a 15-year-old, I'm a safe fill in the blank. And now I can choose behavior that's helpful and healthy for me versus continuing mindlessly being in a way that's not servicing me or my relationships. Huge.
What are the top 3 or 4 things that we should know about being a somatic practitioner?
Things you should know. That we have to practice it too. So it's just like any other thing. You know, when you're in fitness, you can't just tell people to do the exercises. You have to engage in it as well. And so as a somatic practitioner, it's never to say that I have all of the answers. I will be in a session with someone else and things will come that I'm not aware of, right? And so I would say that it is a practice. It's not one of those things where you get it done. You know, you go through 10 sessions, you're like, I'm healed, it's all over. You might have tools, but it's a practice that you have to continue. I'd also say that you don't necessarily need a practitioner per se, or to spend a lot of money to do this. You can probably just, you know, as I call it, sitting with self and noticing what comes and understanding or asking yourself some questions to figure out what might be under that, like what the root might be. But it's not mumbo jumbo. I will also say that it's also deeply connected to lots of cultural practices, right? And so things like being in a circle, in a women's circle, in a red tent, or other rites of passage often had spaces where women, men, anyone could sort of just allow who they are to just show up fully. We just don't have a lot of those spaces. And so laying on your back, you know, going to therapy, you know, being with yourself and really paying attention to your body is something that you can access. But I do think having a facilitator helps notice and identify things that we might not notice ourselves. Like if I say something, someone might hook onto it. And I'm like, I've said that 50 times. What do you mean something's there? Because I just didn't hear it the same way. So I think that's helpful. Mm-hmm.
Do you work with groups also? Or
I work with groups also. One of the things I often say is that healing is not done in isolation. And so for me, somatics can be just, you know, something that I want because I want to have a better connected relationship with my body, but it also impacts how I relate to other people. And so having the support, particularly, I mean, I think, you know, humans are creatures that like to connect in groups. And so any time where you can get the support, where you could also witness others. So in some instances I've had, you know, where a person might talk for 15 minutes and I am just listening deeply to what they're sharing, and that feels like a release for them. And so having others witness and maybe mirror back to you what they experienced or what they got can also be something that's very healing for the person who's witnessed and for the witness themselves.
How long has somatic practicing been in our culture? Is this something that's been around for a long time?
I think it's been around for a really long time, hundreds of years. I mean, I think it's very connected to yoga, breath work, and all of those are about inhabiting and paying attention to your body. But I think culturally in capitalism, I have to say, we don't get allowed to just rest and be in our body or even breathe, right? My dad used to say it all the time. If we knew how great the breath was for you, we'd breathe more. So even something as simple as going outside in the morning, even if it's cold, going out and taking a couple of deep breaths, just sitting in quiet in the sun. I like nature, so trees are one of my favorite things by the ocean. We can't always get that in New Jersey, but just allowing yourself to pause, your full body, just being able to pause and rest, sleeping well, eating well, all those things are things that can help.
As you can see and hear, Lucy has a wealth of knowledge that could benefit all of us through somatic therapy. To view the full interview, go to my website, kirkcharles.com/newgameplan, or go to my YouTube channel, or click on the link in the description of this video. That's it for today's show, and I hope you enjoyed it. Keep on striving, keep giving everything you got, because the new you is right around the corner. I'll see you next time.